This is week 4 of the spring trimester. I'm Jennifer Marie, and this is my Atelier diary. On Monday, for the portrait that I've been working on, I thought I was going to be starting the painting because I'd been working on the transfer drawing, but Matt and Magda decided that I should spend one more day on the transfer drawing. So I did, and Magda showed me a few things on how to get the drawing to just get more specific and get a better likeness of Brian. And so working one more day on it, I definitely got it more specific, and it just gave me time also not to make this just a transfer drawing for a painting, but it's actually a little drawing now that I'm pretty proud of. So like usual, they're right to have me work on something longer, even though I'm usually just more excited to jump right into the painting. So then on Tuesday, I started the painting. So I transferred the drawing onto the canvas. So by doing that, I've explained this in some other videos, but quickly I'll take tracing paper on top of the drawing and use a marker and trace the simplified lines of the portrait, take the tracing paper off, go to the reverse side, trace over those marker lines with a shadow color of paint, and then I'll put the tracing paper up on my canvas on the right way and make sure everything's lined up, and take a ballpoint pen and trace over those marker lines again, so then the paint is being pushed onto the canvas with that ballpoint pen, so you get really fine lines of tracing. So then for that day to do the first wash, I take a shadow color, which is the same paint that I used to get the image onto the canvas, and I just work with filling in the shadow shapes. So the first day, I don't think I used any turpentine or anything. It was just dry brushing paint on to make sure that you get a clear shadow shape and then a clear light shape. So it's really just playing with the light and shadow design. And so I was fairly happy with how the wash turned out, so I wanted to work on the next day applying a more fluid paint so I could get more specific, rather than the wash is kind of like this airy, well, dry brushing, at least I can't get too specific yet, because since the paint isn't fluid, you're not using any medium in it, you kind of just get like this like cloudy effect of what you want with the shadow design. So for Wednesday, I wanted to get things more specific, so I was mixing a medium into it, which was just turp and black oil, just to get the paint more fluid. And so I mixed up the shadow color, background color, and then a color that was just going to represent the lights, all of the lights, so just to keep it really simple. And then so I could make sure that I had a blend between the shadow color to the light, I mixed up a dark halftone in between that. So really, I'm just working with 4 mixtures. And I was working fast because I only have 2 weeks, or maybe 2.5 weeks, that would be working on this painting. So I was pushing it along, and I felt like the first hour was going really well, and I was still holding on to the likeness and things were getting more structural. But then the next 2 hours, because our sessions are 3 hours long, I really lost it, and it just was going away from the likeness of Brian, and I just kept going back to try and simplify things, like all of my tricks, what I do to try and get the structure back, like simplifying the lines and like all the shapes. But I don't know, I couldn't get it to look like Brian, and by the end of the day on Wednesday, I was pretty frustrated and down about it. So then on Thursday, when Matt critiqued my painting, I told him that I was feeling frustrated because I felt like I had a likeness of Brian, but then I completely lost it. And so he said it's how I had painted it, it's really hard to even compare shapes or likenesses because it's not painted in a naturalistic way. And so he said to just try and get the naturalism back in it so you can start judging the proportions and shapes and gesture of him to make sure that I can get his likeness of Brian back. And so what he meant to make it more naturalistic was to really focus mostly on edge quality, because on Wednesday I realized that my painting, all the edges were exactly the same and super sharp, which is not what Brian looks like, or anybody looks like. They're just not made up of really sharp edges, because it kind of gives it a cartoony look. So the whole day I just worked on getting the edges to look like how the edges of shapes where they meet together and blend into each other really looked how Brian looks in nature. So this day I mixed up all the four color mixtures exactly the same. And actually the paint also was still really wet, so that layer of paint I could still move it around quite a bit. So I improved the painting so much, literally by just playing with edges. And I know I've talked about this a lot, and the more I paint, the more I realized how important edge quality is to find. You do find sharp edges, but then you also have to have a wide range of softness in edges as well. And so I want to show side by side the Wednesday painting compared to the Thursday painting. And like I said, the paint is all the same mixtures, just working with edge quality, and how much better and more naturalistic the one on Thursday with just the softer edges looks than the sharper one. And so also when it's looking more naturalistic with all the variation in edges and how they actually appear in nature, it's so much easier for me to see where I need to move forms to get the likeness more accurate to Brian. And then on Friday, Magda gave me a critique, and she was saying that some of my big proportions were a little bit off, that I could get closer to Brian. For example, his face was looking too wide, especially from the cheeks on down, so I needed to bring those forms in and things like that, and move the mouth around a little bit. And Magda has said some things that really clicked with me with doing portraits. Because like I said, I have really only done full figure people before and not just worked on a head. And she was saying things like, well, and Matt's been saying this too, that it's the exact same working with a full figure to a portrait, just everything that you're doing is in a much smaller area. So Magda was saying how you find a gesture with a whole figure, which I feel like I understand that, and I'm pretty decent at that, that it's the same thing, you're just using a lot smaller planes to find the gesture. So for example, like Brian's forehead, it's wider and it definitely looks like it narrows down. So she was saying you just find those planes and make sure that the gesture of the plane is matching up to Brian's gesture of the planes, and you're still finding gesture, it's just in smaller areas. And the same thing for proportions too, like with the like with his face being too wide down here, she said it's just like how you would be comparing like the chest to the width of the arms or the width of the legs. You're just working in a smaller area. And she also said too, I needed to paint in the shoulders, because I hadn't painted the shoulders, I just had this quick outline done, and she said it looked like the shoulders were too wide and like they were tilted in a bit of a different direction than how Brian's shoulders were actually tilted. So I painted the shoulders and made them more accurate, and also seeing the proportion of the shoulders also helped me to make sure that the proportion of the head was right as well, because if my shoulders were too wide, I would be making the head too wide as well. But I left Friday being really happy with how this painting is going, so I'm excited definitely for next week, because I have a full other week that I can be working on this painting, so get a really solid block in and maybe start resolving, probably not, but just to finish up this painting in one more week. And now for my cast painting that I've been doing in the afternoons. This has mostly just been, I've spent previously almost all the time working on the shadows, and now I'm working in the lights, and I'm trying to key up the painting to be brighter. And oil paint is transparent, so it's taking a few passes to really build up the opacity to get the lights to be really bright. And at the end of this week, I'm still not there. I still need to make it brighter. But it's funny how your brain can kind of trick you into thinking that your painting is maybe more accurate than it is, because I thought I had the key actually not too far off, and I would look at my cast and I would look at my painting. But that's why I think it's really important to be looking in your mirror a lot, or just try and make sure that you have a fresh eye to be looking at your painting. So what I did, what I don't normally do, so it does give me a fresh eye, is I take my mirror and I will stand backwards with my back facing the painting, and I'll look at my mirror and see the reflection of my painting facing backwards. And that just made it really, really clear to me how dark my painting is and how I really have a lot of room to push it up brighter. So I have been trying to do this and trying to really work the whole painting in one session, or to like get everywhere in the painting, which is tricky because it's a big painting. And so it's fun though, because I'm using big brushes and working really fast to try and get the whole thing worked on. But it's just going to take, I think, a lot more passes to get it keyed up properly. And Matt has also been pushing me to push the color with this painting, and saying that sometimes to make a painting brighter, you really do have to push the color, and make sure that making things brighter, you're just not using a ton of white to make everything look pasty, because especially this cast, it does have a lot of color in it. It's pretty yellow. So I'm working with that, especially because in some of my other paintings, I think they are a bit grayed down, and so I would like to practice pushing color more. And finally, I'll leave you with this drawing that I did on Tuesday, this little figure drawing that was a 2-hour session, and I had a lot of fun with it and getting to play with line variation. And this is also the model that we're gonna have, I believe, for our next long pose.